Okay, thank you for your attention. I'm Steve Wilbanks, the chair of the Conservation Commission in Strafford. John Echevarria, who will be making the presentation. I just wanted to let you know that the Conservation Commission, when we heard about this project, tried to calculate the impact of 20,000 people on this rural environment, and it seemed like something we ought to be looking at ahead of time. John has been doing some research on this, and will make a presentation, and then be available for questions. And the Conservation Commission will be, this is a regular meeting, so we'll be meeting afterwards, but you can, if interested, you can stay for that. But
And everybody here is eligible to become an officer? Is that?
well, you're certainly eligible to attend. We're limited in the number of people we have in the Conservation Commission. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to let John take over.
Okay, thank you. Preparing a presentation is sort of a big way of stating it. This is more sort of crowdsourcing. I've relied on a lot of people in the room and others who are not in the room for a lot of information and wisdom, and so whatever I'm presenting here reflects a collective effort. And with Teresa's expert assistance, so this is the NewVista project we're talking about. This is David Hall, an engineer from Utah, who is the primary mover behind this project. He was the head of something called the Novatech Corporation, which was very invested in developing drilling technology and selling drilling technology. Novatech was sold in the last year to Schlumberger, which is the largest oil services firm in the world, for an undisclosed sum, which sounds like a lot, but I don't know but we don't know the exact number. According to Hall, at least 100 million of the proceeds have been dumped into the NewVista Foundation, which is bankrolling this effort. Mr. Hall, as I say, is an engineer and has been working on this project for a number of years, which I will be describing. I think it's fair to say that Mr. Hall, from all appearances, has a really genuine concern about the plight of the planet and is trying to move forward an agenda which, whatever its problems, is well-intentioned. I think he also deserves credit for approaching this venture in a totally guileless way. The Disney Corporation decided to take over North Florida and build Disney World. They went out in the dead of night and acquired tens of thousands of acres without anybody knowing about it. David Hall just went out and started buying it and started recording his deeds. And that's not exactly the way in which you carefully and surreptitiously acquire a large tract of land. And then when, as was bound to happen, it became public that he was buying all this land, he's been quite willing to communicate with people. He held what is now a rather famous conference call session in the town library in Tunbridge, and he's had email communication with a number of people in the community. He's been quite open about what he's trying to do, even in the face of some fairly blistering criticism. The other important star of the story is Nicole Antal, who's our candidate for the Vermont Pulitzer Prize. She's a blogger and journalist who is also an employee of the Sharon Library. And being a conscientious library employee, she apparently is in the habit of checking the land records to see if any deep pockets have arrived in town who might be willing to support the library, which seems like a really clever strategy. In the course of doing her library duty, she ran across this NewVista name over and over and over again. And then she did a little checking, and she talked to clerks in other towns and discovered that the NewVista Foundation had acquired some 900 acres of land. And she called up Mr. Hall and had an interview with him. And with no one else aware of this, at least in the journalistic community, she put together a story. And as she described it a couple of days ago, she had it on her laptop and she said, "Can this be real? And can it possibly be true that I'm the only person who knows about this?" And she hesitated to push the button for a couple of days. And then finally she pushed send and it went off. And really the rest is history, because she really opened up people's eyes to what's going on. So what is New Vista? This is not a small idea. This is a big idea. The goal of this venture is to achieve global environmental balance, global ecological balance. And there's a particular means that's being presented in order to achieve that, and that is to build a worldwide network of environmentally and socially sustainable villages, communities, and megalopolises. The ultimate vision is a comprehensive approach to human development. It's based on building communities, but the approach that's being put forward involves education and governance and transportation. The idea is to create compact, self-contained communities that have a small ecological footprint. So the cornerstone of the building project is the community. If you go to the next slide, please. And this is the New Vista community. And this consists of about 1,900 acres of land. And between 16,000 and 20,000 people would live here. That would be a density of development that's about 300 times the density of Strafford. The center square is a commercial and consists of commercial and residential blocks where people would live, where there would be retail businesses and commercial businesses. And then there are these 4 triangles around the edge, which are for intensive agriculture and industrial and animal husbandry and even a drilling block. The center block would have gardens everywhere on the roofs, in the open spaces, greenhouses on all the roofs. So that's the community. Then you go down one level to the so-called district, because a community is made up of a bunch of districts. This is, and there are 24 in a community. This depicts the district. This is from the New Vista Foundation website. If you go to the next one, you go down to a village, and then go ahead. And this is the village. And there are 4, I've finally got this all down. There are 4 villages in a district, 24 districts in a community. Go ahead. So to understand what he's doing, it's useful to think about Russian dolls, right? Nested objects. Go ahead. So from the mega to the mini, there's the community. It's not actually, it's not the top, as I get to it in a minute, but for the present, let's think of this as the top, the community, that diamond-shaped space housing 16 to 20,000 persons on 1,900 acres. Then you have a district. You saw that middle picture of 6 to 8, would house 6 to 800 persons, and then a village with 160 to 210 persons. And then there are additional units below that. There are groups. It takes 2 groups to form a village. And then you have a so-called standard building, which has residential on top, commercial on the bottom. 5 standard buildings make up a group. And then buildings are made up of work-live units, which are spaces in which people live and work. And then finally you get to the smallest unit, which is the core module, which is for ease, it can be thought of as kind of a mini house in a box. Tiny little space with movable beds, movable partitions, shower, plumbing, but a very small living space. The key to understanding this project is it is intended to be modular. It's like a, what's the toy the kids play with? Legos. It's a big Lego set, right? They're little Legos, and you add them all up, you make a bigger Lego structure, and the idea is that one can construct these modular units rapidly, efficiently, on a mass basis, and use them to construct larger and larger communities. So it's modular and it's scalable. You can get bigger and bigger and bigger. So just to give you a point of reference, this is Cobb Farm in Heartland, right? This is a ecologically oriented community, right? Quite successful. Donella Meadows was involved in its founding, pursuing some of the same objectives, and no doubt intended as a model, but not self-consciously designed to be scalable to a massive degree. Another example is the Dimetrodon in Warren, designed as a kind of co-housing venture, ecologically sustainable, compact living. Again, no doubt thought of as a model, but not intended to be scalable. But not so the New Vista project. You remember I talked about the communities, which are the triangles, the diamonds. But there's a level above that, which is a New Vista. A New Vista consists of 50 of those communities, each one of them containing 15,000 to 20,000 people for a total population of 700,000 to 1 million persons. Now, we haven't heard that he intends to fully implement this vision here in Sharon and Strafford and Tunbridge, but this is the paradigm that he's building on. So if you go to the next slide, this shows what it would look like laid out on the ground. This is the community, and then the full plan for a New Vista is multiple versions of these, multiples of those until you get to 1 million people. But it doesn't stop there. It's even bigger than that. He says, and this is drawing from this very useful document, which is very hard to find on the web anymore, but that Nicole Antal conveniently saved. It's a 26-page single-spaced document called New Vistas Massively Scalable Sustainability with Respect for the Human Scale, and it explains the whole idea in great detail, and I'd be happy to provide a copy to anybody who wants one. But he says a truly sustainable solution requires a comprehensive solution that is scalable, and the required level of scalability is global. A New Vista is a cluster of sustainable planned urban communities designed for replication on a global scale. If New Vistas were built throughout the world, sustainable prosperity could be achieved globally. Here you go. This is the ultimate vision, right? The idea is this is a model for human existence that should be embraced worldwide, in which billions of people would live. And if we did this, then the world would be saved, and it all can begin here in the hills of Tunbridge and Strafford. Okay? So the guy's not kidding around. I mean, you got to give him credit. You know, he's not thinking small. So his selling point, what he's selling is the notion that these communities and these agglomerations of communities would have a minimal environmental impact. The effort is to limit the human footprint by integrating industry, agriculture, commerce, and living space in a self-contained, compact community. There would be a very small footprint. The people living in the community would be living at, with including all the agricultural land, at less than 1/10 of an acre per person, which doesn't approach Manhattan densities, but is fairly dense, certainly for this part of the world. Within the communities, people would walk or they would use public transit. There would be no cars. The individual housing units would be very, very small. There would be within the community a combination of living and working, including heavy industry. A little hard to imagine, but heavy industry. Materials would be recycled. The materials used to build the structure would be recycled. Once materials had been exhausted, they would be recycled. A great emphasis on energy efficiency in the construction of the structure. Reliance on renewable energy resources inside the community, solar, wind, geothermal. The food for the community would be grown in the community. It would be grown on the rooftops, in the gardens, next to the houses, in the little rectangle, in the little triangles around the perimeter. To get a cow into one of these, the suggestion is that a cow would never see the light of day in one of these communities. Maybe a rabbit, maybe a chicken, but almost certainly never a cow. Lots of grain, no high protein meats. And I mentioned that little block that was for the drilling. And his commitment to a self-contained and independent community is so extreme that the goal is to use that block to drill into the earth in order to acquire all the sand, rock, brick, concrete that is needed in order to build the structure. The idea is that resources would not be gathered from the outside world and environmental impacts would not be exported outside. A really incredibly ambitious target. So that's the environmental vision. Governance. there's a very distinctive governance plan. Each community, and there, as you know, there would be multiple communities. Ingrid, you got to stop laughing. You know, you're just. Each community would be a legal trust, that's something we lawyers know about, and it would have a 12-member board of directors. Underneath that board of directors, there would be a whole lot of presidents and vice presidents and captains who would be appointed by the board. Some of them would be full-time, some of them would be part-time. All told, 18% of all the residents in the community would have some role in leading or managing the operation. Including women? Including women. Yes, although most of the leadership positions, according to this document, would be assigned to couples, married couples, a man and a wife. A certain limited, yes, certain kinds of couples, men and women couples. And a certain number of limited positions would be available to people who are not married. So in terms of governance, so you know, Roz would have a very low position. So each community, each of these diamonds would be, according to Donald Hall and his co-authors, be subject to the laws of the local jurisdiction. So if this existed in Strafford, they'd be subject to Strafford taxes, they'd be subject to the laws of Vermont. They would recognize that. On the other hand, there would be bylaws, sort of like any planned unit development. There would be bylaws, and the expectation is that most disputes within the community and between the community and the leadership would be resolved based on the bylaws that have been adopted by the organization. But this is different from your typical planned unit development or intentional community. This would not be, if you move into a homeowners association governed condominium, you get a vote typically, and you get to vote for the homeowners association. You can run to be on the homeowners association. It's a sort of democracy within a democracy, and there are all sorts of complaints about how democratic it is or isn't, but there's some kind of process by which members of the community get to be represented in the governing body. That is very clearly not the model here. There would be no moderator. There would be no town meeting. There would be a board of directors that would appoint leaders, and people would be eligible to join the community. And if they didn't like the way things were working out, their remedy is to pick up and leave.
So how is this board of directors selected?
Well, that's not spelled out. Presumably it is created by the founders of this enterprise at the beginning, and I would guess that it would be self-perpetuating. In other words, when people retired or they died, that the members of the board would find new people to fill the vacancies. And girls.
Don't you need to be a Mormon?
No, well, there's nothing in the materials I've read, but he has said quite publicly that no, this is not, you do not have to be a Mormon to be a member of this. The economics of the project are even a little more surprising. When an individual, and I thought I would just quote the statements in full rather than try to summarize them. When you show up as a member, you basically hand over all your worldly assets to the community, and you get a certificate indicating the value of the assets you've turned over. You can hold on to a limited amount of cash for sort of walking around money, but otherwise you hand over all of your assets. The trust that oversees the community would operate legally, according to this document, for the benefit of each and every one of the participants, but the participants would not have an ownership stake in the trust. They could not sell their interest in the stake. They would not be shareholders. They would not be stockholders. They would simply be beneficiaries who, if they get unhappy, can leave or they can stay. This tithing or depositing process is central to the financing of these projects. The idea is that the people who want to live in the community would make deposits some small, some presumably quite large, that would represent the capital that would allow the community to be built and to function. Other funds might come from long-term notes, loans, non-voting equity interests sold to qualified investors, and grants from local, state, and national governments and foundations. Yeah, but what the mix would be is obviously hard to predict.
Choose to leave, do you get your assets back when you go?
It doesn't, I don't, presumably. Although it's a really interesting question, because if participants who join the community contribute the capital that's necessary to get the community up and running, and then a bunch want to leave, that could threaten the whole community. And a lot of investment vehicles that invite people to put in money impose restrictions on when you can take out your money and how rapidly you can take out your money. It's hard to imagine that that this community could be financially viable if any and all the participants could leave whenever they wanted with all of their capital. So it seems, yes.
John, you said earlier that the people there would be taxed on the same basis as any resident of Vermont, but does the foundation itself have any sort of a tax loophole like a church might have, where the property taxes are tax exempt?
I've heard that debated. I think the position would be no. It's a more complicated corporate structure than I've said, because there's a mix of a trust, which I believe is a nonprofit organization, which owns two profit-making entities that actually run the facility. What the situation would be for local taxation, I don't know. At the meeting some of us attended in South Royalton, that issue was raised, and a representative of the, I think somebody who I believe was speaking for NewVista insisted that this property would be taxed. But I don't know. If we get to that, we'd have to know the answer.
Did that mention education that we get to that?
I can mention it now. It's not in, it's the idea, the education would be private, it would be inside the community, it would be community funded. It would be totally independent of the surrounding community. So the natural question that comes to mind is, what does Mormonism have to do with it, right? So I want to say one thing first. So everyone is entitled to their own religion, right? That is in the US Constitution. It is in the Vermont Constitution. Everyone is entitled to honor, to worship their God in a way that they choose. And I at least do not want to be understood as casting any aspersions on that principle, and I don't think most fair-minded people do. So that's something that I want to emphasize up front. But it's still fair to ask the question, what does Mormonism have to do with it? Because the nature of this community, its physical form, its method of governance, its ultimate viability are related to Mormonism, because so much of the structure and organization of this community is rooted in Mormon principles, and particularly the teachings of Joseph Smith. In particular, does this look familiar? This comes from a writing of Joseph Smith from the 1830s, in which he laid out his ideal form of a community. And David Hall has been quite clear and explicit and open in acknowledging that the community, the centerpiece of his vision, is derived from the writings of Joseph Smith. If you go through the NewVista Foundation website, there are numerous statements stating in broad and categorical terms that this vision is essentially copied out of the Mormon playbook.
John, are those italics yours, or?
The italics are mine. The statements are from the NewVista Foundation. All of the elements of the model are based on the writings of Joseph Smith. NewVistas conform to descriptions of a city that Joseph Smith prescribed. The economic structure for a NewVista community is largely prescribed in Joseph Smith's writings. Go ahead. The leadership structure of a NewVista community derives from a structure for Mormon church leadership that was revealed to Joseph Smith between 1830 and 1842. Many of the ideas relating to health and education of the Genesis, and then the community layout is related. So this is Not a religious enterprise, but it is inspired by the teachings of Joseph Smith. So that's the New Vista project. And now the question is, well, why us? How did we get so lucky, right? And the answer, according to Nicole Antal's original reporting, based on our interview with David Hall, was I'm a member of the LDS Church. I lived in Upper New York State with my parents, and we used to come to Sharon in the summer, and I loved the place. And so it just occurred to me that based on these fond memories, this would be a wonderful place to build a community for 16 to 20,000 people. So what are we talking about? This is Strafford, this is Royalton, and we're talking, this is a picture of a Google map. We're talking about this area, generally speaking. If you go one more, we'll zoom in a little bit. This is the, I believe, this is Dairy Hill Road. This is the memorial, no? What is that?
I could talk to this. If you give me 2 seconds.
You bet.
This is the old Clifford Farm property. Fabric Road, this is Robinson Road, but Fabric Road comes down this way toward the Midway Station. This is an incredibly nasty road that comes up through. This was, used to be owned by Jack Loftus. It borders on the Mormon property that comes in here. I used to own this 56 acres here. This is a rocky ridge line with about that much soil on it and hard rock underneath that drops off. There is a snowmobile trail that comes up on that ridge line. There's no water. There are a couple of bear dens. But other than that, the contour is that this sweeps up to a very bony north-south ridge and then starts to tail off in lumpy fashion to Dairy Hill Road, another ridge. So this is a decent paved road to back here.
And the land that's been purchased is here.
This thing, they bought this whole Clifford Farm from Jack and Ann Loftus. They bought the property that was mine, and they bought all the way up into there. This was originally strip logged. We bought it from the logger.
And some land over there.
Yeah, 15 years ago, but it's,
Not forgiving.
well, it's no place I would build a community.
So if you go, so this is this may be a little hard to associate with the aerials we just saw, but this is the current set of record that we have of the properties that have been purchased. It's 900 acres and counting, up to about 1,500 acres now. And there's not and this is the Joseph Smith Memorial. Property has been acquired around it, but there are also some random pieces. There's a piece in South Royalton that was purchased. There's something on Spring Road, but most of it is clustered around there. Okay. So what are the concerns? You got to sort of start with the obvious one, right? Which is, what are the chances? What are the chances that this place that Mr. Hall had such fond childhood memories of would be the optimal place to build a 20,000 person community? You might wish that somebody with grand development ambitions like this would proceed in a kind of more systematic and logical way than based on kind of childhood memory. I mean, isn't that the sort of the elephant in the room? So you have to sort of acknowledge that strange thing. The other thing I think you have to focus on, and again, this is not an aspersion on the Mormon faith, but is it really sensible to think that the ideas that Joseph Smith developed in the 1830s to address the concerns that he had are necessarily going to provide a sensible template to deal with the ecological problems that we face in the 21st century? Not likely. You wouldn't, and this isn't, again, to cast aspersions on Mr. Hall's motives or his thinking or a lot of the good ideas he has in his proposal. But insofar as his plan of development is based on Joseph Smith's ideas of nearly 200 years ago, you have to wonder whether they have any contemporary relevance. focusing on sort of more immediate legal and policy concerns. Is this project consistent with the regional and local plans for the area? I'll talk about that in a minute. What are the possible ecological impacts of the project? And what is the potential fallout of the project if it failed? The history is full of grandiose projects that got half built, that got built and then got diverted for some other purpose. And what would be the consequence of launching ourselves on something like this and then having it bust? So go ahead. So in terms of the plans, I pulled this statement off the Vermont Department of Housing and Community Development website. The primary land use planning goal in Vermont, and this is reflected throughout our statutes, is to plan developments in order to maintain the historic settlement pattern of compact villages and urban centers separated by rural countryside. That drives all of the planning and regulatory policies that are supposed to apply to the Regional Planning Commission and to Strafford and Tunbridge and all the other communities. The problem, and so this is what the regional plan looks like from the Two Rivers Ottaquechee, in which they've depicted the village center, Sharon, South Royalton, South Strafford, Strafford, and then they've designated this area as rural or as conservation. And this is slated for low density residential development, farming, forestry, and so on. So according to the plans that have been adopted by Two Rivers in accordance with the state policies, this is not where a large urban agglomeration is supposed to go, right? Not supposed to go there. There are other concerns. This is a mapping of vernal pools. In addition to the ridge line, there are also a lot of wet areas, I guess, in this area, raising various obstacles. There's also an enormous, and in some places, I gather, fairly mature forest cover that would have to be taken out to build this. And then finally, I just randomly got on the internet and said, disastrous subdivisions following foreclosure, and came up with 3 random images that this is America in the last decade, in the aftermath of the economic collapse, and this is what the built environment looks like in some parts of our country, and one needs to worry about what would happen if this enormous venture were launched and it failed. Go ahead. But I think the central concern that people seem to raise and that people keep coming back to is the effect of this development on the communities of Tunbridge, of Strafford, of Sharon, of Royalton, and the people who live there. And this, I think, was well expressed by Belden Paulson, who wrote an open letter to David Hall. It's been widely published around the state. He lives up in Vershire. And he, by the way, is involved in the development of intentional communities that are intended to be environmentally sensitive. And he wrote to Hall and said, you got some good ideas, you just picked the completely wrong location. And that inserting over a short time a population of hundreds, even thousands of new residents, plus an array of new buildings alien to the existing environment would radically and negatively change these towns.
Excuse me, when we're talking about residents, could we also talk about the wildlife, which is resident there, and the millions of lives that are going to be lost?
Thank you. So just to underscore, and this is going to make you even madder, Roz, but in keeping with my emphasis on human community, these are the people of our neighborhood. Go ahead, just flip through these. You'll recognize some of these people. Keep going. Remember that. And that. Okay, so these are the communities that are at risk. Go ahead. So what now? Well, the starting place is there's an incredibly uncertain time frame for consideration of this. David Hall has said this is going to take decades, and the people of the region shouldn't be concerned because I'll be dead and they'll be dead, right? And so we'll all be dead and it doesn't matter. But I think he has a vision that outlasts his lifetime, and many of us in the room have a vision of this region that outlasts our lifetimes as well. So that's not exactly a very comforting thought. notwithstanding the fact that he says this is going to take decades to unfold, he seems to be moving forward at an incredible clip. He spent millions of dollars acquiring land. He's acquired a full-time lobbyist who is spending the week bringing Mr. Hall around to every notable in the Upper Valley and in Montpelier to meet with people. He has armies of engineers out in Utah. He has consultants in Vermont working on this. He spent more money in the last 6 months on this project than most of us will spend in a lifetime. So maybe he's, maybe this is decades off, but all the signs are that it's not. A couple of notable statements he's made. He says, if the people of Vermont don't want this, then fine, I'll go away. If the people of Vermont can't come to really love the concept, it's not going to be done. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. Developers shouldn't be able to force things on people. Secondly, he said, and I think this was at the Tunbridge meeting, was it not? Where somebody raised the question, what are you going to do with all this land if this project doesn't go forward? He said, it never occurred to me to ask that question of myself. So, at the best, this is a 50-50 proposition, probably not even that. So the pregnant question is, well, what happens to the 900 acres, the 1,500 acres, when this project doesn't go forward? Yeah.
How do the people of Vermont state their opinion on it?
Well, thank you for asking that. We'll get to that. Yes.
John, I think he's also said a couple of times that when he refers to Vermont, he's referring to the state as a whole. That he really doesn't expect local people in the communities to ever like this idea. And he doesn't really care.
You want to speak to that, Ingrid? You were at the meeting where this was something he said. This was a question that came up in the Tunbridge meeting.
3/4 of the meeting, he kept saying, if the local people don't want it, if the local people don't want it, I won't do it, I won't do it. And about 3/4 of the way through, someone asked a question or made a statement, well, we don't think we do want it. And he said, oh, I'm sorry, did I mean the towns? I meant the state.
Right.
So,
Meaning state government.
yes.
Yeah.
John, it's interesting to me that we're all framing this on the surface of the community and the building, what's being put on the surface of the land and how this person appears, Mr. Hall. And what occurred to me is that a lot of things are done in the name of God. So we're spending time on Mormonism or this or that. What isn't coming up yet is his proclivity and expertise is going into the earth and extracting precious elements. So that his main proclivity and ability is a mosquito. So he has sold that for a vast fortune. Therefore, he's good at that. I would believe that his perspective in evaluating any piece of land anywhere of the world is geosatellite observed, and the veins of precious elements are well defined and of a knowledge base that makes this guy click and make his decisions. So I suggest we look at what lies beneath as opposed to...
This is the next copper rush, right?
It could be anything, and it could be a straight pathway into another dimension to move gas, oil, water, whatever. And that's, I think we should all take that into consideration because it's not being imaged at all.
I'm curious about the population of people that are supposed to fill these communities. Are these climate refugees?
It's really nothing I've seen really gets into that in any detail.
Would it be marketed to Mormons?
I really can't. He's been quite explicit in saying that membership in the Mormon Church would not be a requirement in order to join the community. Beyond that, I don't really know.
John, back to prior point, at the meeting at the Tunbridge Library, he said that long-term residents of the area would not be psychologically capable of accepting this or understanding it.
Well, those are two different things, you know, understanding and accepting, I think are two different things.
The other thing is he's talked about a gas pipeline that will be required to fuel the community coming from somewhere. This natural gas pipeline.
Well, some of his plans refer to the need for gas to provide energy, and then I don't think he's planning on developing the gas on site. He's going to somehow pipe that in.
Outside resources are going to have to come into this, like the gas. Where do they get the money to pay for those and for the taxes? Just people moving in can't do that because that's not a sustainable.
Well, okay, I left out, fair enough, and as I mentioned, this community would include commercial, retail, industrial, agricultural activities. And the idea is that the community would recruit businesses and residents who have businesses to become part of this community. And he has a whole vision based on the idea that there would be a number of profit-making businesses in the community. Each of the businesses would be taxed 10% of their profits. That would be put into a collective that would provide computer services, accounting services. In other words, there'd be sort of a back office operation that would be provided by the community to sustain a variety of profit-making businesses. How revenues or profits are shared between the communities and the business people, I don't know. But this would not be, Kendall on a hillside only. Okay, so what might be done? Well, the ace in the hole for Vermont is our relatively unique and important Act 250 land use review process. It applies to every project above a certain threshold size. Don't worry about that. This project is above that threshold. And Act 250 has a whole series of criteria that have to be examined before a district commission can issue a permit under Act 250. But the most important of all the criteria is number 10, which states that to be approved, a project must be in conformance with any local or regional plan. That is the Two Rivers Ottaquechee plan or the plans of each of the 4 towns. And so this is really the opportunity because if the plan of the community states, lays out policies in clear terms stating that a project of this type could not be allowed, it cannot get an Act 250 permit, and that's the end of the story. So let's just go, let me go to the next one. Do the regional plans of the Two Rivers Ottaquechee organization and the local towns need a tune-up in light of this threat? And the answer is definitely yes, they do. Right? In Strafford, we're fortunate to be engaged as we speak in an update of our comprehensive plan that has to be done in the next couple of months. So we have a very short and immediate window in order to address this. Other towns, Tunbridge and others, are addressing it. When does this need to be done? Well, it needs to be done before Mr. Hall and the NewVista Foundation submits a final application. Because once they submit a final application, they're entitled to the benefit of the plan that's then in place. In order to have a plan in place that influences the regulatory process, it has to be completed before that application gets final. And then finally, who are you going to call? Well, I would start with David Hall. He has said that if people of Vermont don't want this, I'm not going to proceed. So if, whatever your views are, I encourage you to send him an email. You could also contact Peter Gregory, who's the executive director of Two Rivers, who's in charge of the regional planning update, which is now underway. You can contact your local planning commission. You can just buttonhole Martha Walk, who's right there, who's a member of the planning commission, and tell her your views. And you can thank Jim Meslin for coming here, and then you can email Mark McDonald and Tim Briglin, and I'm done with my prepared presentation. Thank you for being such a lively audience.